Hi, I'm Jane Hutchin, and in July 2010 I created 1+1, and up until September 2019 recorded nearly 500 interviews. In this series, I'm bringing together my top 10. They're the conversations which have taken me by surprise or somehow had an impact on me. I hope you enjoyed this interview with actor Eddie Perfect. Eddie Perfect, welcome to 1+1.
Let's do this.
Eddie, you're from a perfect lineage. I'm sorry, I've been dying to say that.
I bet you have.
Did this cause problems for you when you were at school, having a name like Perfect?
Well, it was legitimised in some respects because my father taught at the high school I went to, St Bede's College in Mentone, and thankfully and luckily for me, he was well liked. So there was already a Mr. Perfect there, which laid the groundwork. And I got away, it was okay. Apart from my kind of psychotic PE teacher in high school who used to call me Not So, which he thought was hilarious. Get back in the boat, not so. Go run a lap, not so. Do some push-ups, not so. Why can't you do a pull-up, not so. It was like that. It's actually, when you say it like that, it's probably a little bit traumatic.
Indeed.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, I thought we should get it over and done with at the beginning so we could focus on some good stuff.
Well, when back when they were in the 90s, when people had answering machines, and you would ring up and it would be my dad's voice saying, you've called the perfect family. No irony. It was just the way it was, 40 years of being Eddie Perfect, and that's weird, but it also has rewards. And I feel like it's something, something kind of strange that I've been gifted, that I've had to negotiate. But my kids, they don't want to be perfect. So they're like, we're going to take mum's name. And I'm like, I didn't know that was an option, but it's fine. I'm all right. I've dealt with it. It's part of my life. And, it's got as many benefits as it has negatives.
Okay, well, I'm really glad we've dealt with that.
Yeah, it's done.
Let's move on.
Yes.
Vivid White, the production you're working on at the Melbourne Theatre Company. So that's about the property market. That's, as you've called it, the sugar around the pill. Mm-hmm. Why the property market?
Well, because I basically write as a way of dealing with my middle-class existence. It's therapeutic. I live in a world where my friends are married, they have kids, they're buying houses, they're renovating houses. I bought a house, I've renovated our house. It's this really bizarre world you have to engage in, and it occupies like a 90% of conversations I have with other adults. It's everywhere, from, interior design to how people have chosen to reconfigure their open plan living space, to what areas we should buy in, which is overpriced, which is underpriced. And I find it so boring and I cannot escape it. It's just part of middle class existence in Australia. So I was like, I've got to write something about this. And I had the experience of going to an open for inspection.
Yeah.
And running into my very good friends who were like carbon copies of my wife and I. They're married, they've got 2 kids. And they were interested in their house. And I was like, well, this is interesting. There's no rule book for this. What happens when 2 really close friends both want to buy the same house? And do we have to compete against each other at auction? Because nothing really kind of gives, this is how much money I've got. Like, I can buy this house and you can't. And apparently, if you lose at an auction and you're emotionally invested in that property, the accumulated feeling of loss, it can be equal to grief. And a lot of people who miss out at auction, perpetually find it really depressing. And it's very sad because, you've mentally sort of moved in and then it becomes somebody else's. So I find all of that really fascinating.
So I wonder, when you were growing up in the bricks and mortar that you inhabited, were you always into performing and writing and singing and music?
Yeah, I was always into music from the beginning.
Did your parents encourage that?
Yeah, so my parents sent me to music lessons and piano lessons when I was 5. And I did 2 years of piano until my piano teacher worked out that I was playing everything by ear and not reading, and then stopped letting me hear the piece before I played it. And
what
then
was the problem with that?
they wanted to encourage my ability to sight read music. And because it just completely stunted my ability to actually make music anymore, I really lost interest in it quickly. But I returned to the piano. I have an uncle whose name is Jim, and he's a professional piano bar player. Like, he's played in piano bars his entire life, never had a piano lesson, completely by ear.
Wow.
And he's like a walking encyclopedia of music. And he just said to me, just listen to the radio and play what you hear. And that gave me the permission I needed. And I'm a completely self-taught pianist, completely self-taught composer, because I've got his ears. Genetically, I think I've got really good ears.
Because I think you were interested initially in visual art, weren't you? Is that because you didn't, or you were fearful of trying to make a living from music and performance?
No, it just never occurred to me. It wasn't my number one passion. My number one passion was visual art. And so I spent high school, in the art room drawing, and I was a very technically skilled drawer, but I got to art school. I went to RMIT and studied printmaking because it was the closest thing to drawing, and had it very quickly pointed out to me that I didn't have anything to say.
So you eventually went to Western Australia to study. I think you studied musical theatre.
That's right.
Which I love.
Yeah.
But you also discovered that you wanted to write songs and write your music.
Yeah.
How did that come along? Is that something you'd always done from the time that you had heard the music you wanted to play?
No, I'd started to muck around a little bit writing pop music, and when I got to WAP and I studied music theatre, they don't let you get your hands on a script for all of first year. Basically, at the time, they would put the music theatre class and the theatre class together, and you would devise your own works. And there was a lot of opportunities to put my hand up and to write things. And piece by piece, I was writing for the theatre, and I had 19 students in my class that I could call upon, and it was a very creative and a free environment, like shockingly free. And so every opportunity I got, I wrote. And I've never felt the need for applause and for that affirmation. I don't enjoy that. But
Really?
I've done it. I've performed my own work because it's a vehicle for getting my words and my ideas out there.
It's reprehensible.
But I'm always more interested in the ideas than I am in the performing of those ideas.
It's a crazy mixed up world. I just want to choose the juice bar girl.
In those early days, did you ever have a kind of conflict between whether you wanted to be known as a comedian, as an actor, as a creator? Was that ever a kind of conundrum for you?
Yeah, it was. When I was starting, and I graduated when I was 24 and started working. And I remember when I first started working with my manager, Michael Lynch, he was like, "What are you?
Yeah.
You need to communicate what it is you are. People are confused."
Yeah, because you're almost like a quadruple threat, aren't you? Not even a triple threat. You do the writing as well. So is that hard for sort of an audience to take that on board, do you think?
It is in the beginning, and then eventually I was like, well, what's my attitude to it? And my attitude was, I just can't expend any energy worrying about how people
Define
me and see me. I have a lot of time for the writing and the work itself, and I've always been a firm believer that that work travels a lot further than networking does. And you can shake as many hands in a foyer, you can turn up to as many things, you can smile, you can make friends with people, you can be, the life of the party, the belle of the ball. But if you sit away in the dark on your own, privately, and risk being invisible for however long it takes to make something, that work has an impact. That work travels, and that's been the evidence of that has been borne out again and again and again in my life.
That's interesting, because I heard that a while back you went to the States, with some encouragement from your friend Tim Minchin.
Mm-hmm.
And you came back, and I think the sort of message was that you hadn't, doors had opened, but maybe you hadn't been invited in, so to speak. And yet now you're in the middle of producing the music for Beetlejuice on Broadway.
Beetlejuice.
Is that something that comes along when the time is right, or can you actually hammer on doors and, be taken seriously?
Who knows? That process was really born out of the frustration of not being able to get my hands on a score in Australia. And my wife said, just buy a ticket and go to New York. And so I did, and I emailed and called everyone, and Tim Minchin was amazing. He got me a meeting with his agent in New York, who I met, who was an incredible guy. And that was all great, and it felt like, wow, yeah, cool, I've got an agent. I'm going to get on that great big writer list in the sky in New York. And then I spent maybe 18 months just going back to New York twice a year. And every time I went, I felt like I was further away. And I've read text messages to my wife at that time, right? I felt like I was like face pressed against the glass. I was on my own, away from my family. I had no friends in New York. My only connection was when I went and saw the theatre, and I sat in theatres watching musicals going, I think I can do this. I think I can do this. I just don't know how to start. I don't know how to get in. And then Tim had said, I don't think they've found a composer lyricist for Beetlejuice yet. And I talked to my manager and I said, what's the deal? Can I pitch on this? How do I get inside it? And he's like, oh no, they've already got it out to pitch to all these kind of big writing teams and they don't want to expand it. And I said, what if I just wrote 2 songs for free? Like, it won't cost them any time and money. I'll write 2 songs. If they hate them, it's fine. What do they got to lose? And he was like, oh my God, you do that? I'm like, dude, you don't want to know what I would do to just get my writing under someone's nose. And so we asked, and they said, sure. They sent me a script, said, can you write a song for Beetlejuice and can you write a song for Lydia?
Did you look at the movie as well?
Went back to the movie, which is kind of terrifying.
Can you be scary? What do you think of this?
Because I obviously had seen it when it first came around, and it is essentially plotless.
It's showtime.
So my big question was, is this just going to be an odd, spooky kind of romp, or is there an idea behind it? And as soon as I got the script, I was like, okay, I get this. This is being reconfigured to be a completely different story while staying true to Burton's original concept, while still feeling real in that world, and it had emotional heart. And I wrote 2 songs, and then I got an idea for an opening song, and I sent that in, and then I got the gig, which was crazy. It was crazy because it was good for my agent too, because he had heard my Australian stuff. He'd heard like you imagine a New York agent hearing Shane Warne The Musical. It was like, I like it, but I don't get it, but I like it. All my stuff was really Australian, and I was on Spring Street in Melbourne, and I just fell I just lay in the middle of the road, just going, this is unbelievable. I'm writing a Broadway show. This is the dream. Unbelievable. And it's still unbelievable. It's so cool.
That must be an absolute dream come true.
It's amazing because you get to walk through the door, but what happens when you get in there is up to you. Like, it's not one of those gigs where you just sort of handed a suitcase full of glory. You got to get in there, and then you have to write it. And I've just, like with everything, I've got this thing where, like, if I get an opportunity, I am going to just work so hard at it, and I'm going to make the most of it, and I'll hope that leads to the next thing. And with this one, I just turned myself inside out writing it, and I continue to. And I'm like, I've got this gig, and I live in Australia, so that means I'm doing phone meetings at 4 a.m. in the morning in a park, which I do. I've got this little off the bike path in East Brunswick. There's a picnic table and chair, and I sit there with all of my clothes on at 4 a.m. in the morning, and everyone's like, what time is it there in Melbourne? I'm like, oh yeah, it's 4 a.m. And they're like, oh, but I'm like, this is, I asked for this, so I'm not going to turn around and go, can we do this at, I'm in it, and I'm loving it, and I'm really grateful.
So what happens to the acting career per se? Because you already gave up Offspring.
Yeah.
This is much more important to you?
Oh, yeah. Acting schmacting. I mean, acting.
Tell that to the kids on Play School.
Don't be an actor, kids. I've gotten more respect for actors as I've become a writer because I've seen firsthand how they make or break shows. I think it requires nothing less than like 100% dedication and commitment and passion, and I feel like I don't have those things as a performer. So I'm very happy, I enjoy it, but I am very happy to stand back and let the people that are passionate about it do it, and I think that's right.
So let's talk about some of your body of work. Shane Warne, which was an amazing idea. When you look back at that, I think, how would we describe that? You said it was a strange, almost unsellable idea.
Oh, yeah.
You were like a god, oh yes, you very much amaze me. Take it, Mr. Warne, what are you crazy?
In the end, it was like a restaurant fail. So how do you kind of put that into context? Was that something that was worth, I think, 3 years of your time?
Oh, absolutely. I wrote the music, the lyrics. I wrote the book for Shane Warne The Musical. I musically directed it. I'd cast it. It was everything. It was life turned up to 11.
Meeting you is such a pleasure. I've more cash than you can measure. I just want to call whenever, maybe talk about the weather.
And it was too much, and it was exhausting. But I had the energy and I had the drive, and I didn't know anything, and I just swung for the fences. And it was an idea that really people found difficult because people who like music theatre don't necessarily like sport. But it was a huge learning curve. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong on the first season went wrong. My very good friend and collaborator was a musical director, passed away in week 2 of rehearsals. We had pregnancies. We had people's parents die. We had had to fire an actor just before we went into tech. It was extraordinarily difficult, complex, and I just felt like every day it was like fight. It was a really difficult show to perform, and it met with varying kind of levels of enthusiasm and confusion, and but it was its own thing, and we never recorded it originally, so I always felt that was unfinished business, and we did it again more recently. I can't remember, like 2014, 2013. With an orchestra this time. And it just felt like the idea had been around enough that people were like not questioning. Either I had gotten some more trust as a writer, or the idea has sort of landed with people, and people weren't so much like, what the hell is this? So it was a happy ending for that piece.
But we never cross the line.
Do you still feel like you need a robust conversation when you're writing new works?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what I love about writing for theatre is that it's a never-ending learning process. You're never going to master it. You start to learn your process more. Since having kids, I'm way more efficient with my time. I don't know what the hell I did with my time before, but I used to write a lot less, and now I write a lot more in a lot shorter period of time. And I've had kind of like, every time... If theatre is like the Olympics, every time I've gone into a project, of course you want to win gold. But I think most projects I've sort of ended up with bronze, but I'm on the podium, I'm in there, and it means that the next thing is possible. And I've learned to not be afraid of it. And I love it now. I record all of my demos in Logic in my computer. I was writing in a barn of a space in Collingwood that meant to, so it wouldn't sound like a Gregorian chant. I had to record my vocals under a blanket, and I spent 6 months being Beetlejuice under a blanket, creating these worlds. So I absolutely have a conversation with myself. I'd create the whole world, the orchestra's there, the scenes there, the multiple characters, and you can find new moments in those things. I adore it. It's like getting lost in a little plaything. And now my demos, they remind me of my sketchbooks when I was in art school. Like they're the process you go through to get to the end result, but there's something fresh and experimental and vibrant about them. And I love making music with myself. It's lonely, but I've kind of I've adapted to the loneliness.
On my mind at the moment, in my sort of news bubble, I've been really blown away by the allegations of sexual misconduct and the Harvey Weinstein issue. I wonder, do you ever get kind of bitten by a large news story like that? And do you have the anger to turn that into something?
Well, we're all in the midst of sort of reeling from it. I don't think that the latest sort of social media hashtag of Me Too is harrowing, but it's hardly surprising. I grew up with two sisters. I've always had close female friends. I live in a female-dominated house. Even our axolotl is a girl, and I have this really, I guess, kind of rage, everyday rage, and this is a weird thing for a man to say because I don't experience it firsthand, and it's nothing compared to what women live with on a day-to-day basis. But I despise sexism, and I see it everywhere, and I try and call it out whenever I can. And what I really have a sort of a special hatred for is women being made to feel unsafe in public, even if it's like a drunk guy on a train getting a bit shouty. It infuriates me that one person thinks they have a right in a public space to make other people feel afraid. And in my world, I mean, like just yesterday in rehearsal, it felt like a kind of a daggy thing to do, but I'm like, obviously this is unacceptable. Melbourne Theatre Company is an amazing company where they have really strict sexual harassment and bullying, anti-bullying policies in place. But just to reiterate that is not okay. I think it's a really terrifying state of affairs. My wife works in the corporate world, and so I hear all the stories.
Do you think you could channel that into a piece of work?
It's possible. People often ask me that about objectionable frameworks, ideas, people, policies. Why don't you write a piece about this? And, I'd never rule that out. Absolutely. But I stopped writing about, I got often asked, why don't you write, Tony Abbott the musical, or, I don't want to spend the 3 years of my creative life living with Tony Abbott. I just don't want him entering my creative space and my consciousness. And I increasingly find that it's about my time and energy. I think that when you write, you have to write with love and hope, and so I don't want to reinforce a negative framework. I think there's more practical things to do, which is about hiring women, giving female characters agency inside a play. I'm writing King Kong at the moment, and what is that piece traditionally, but a damsel in distress screaming every third page. And we sat down and we were like, let's flip that completely. Let's give Anne Darrow supreme agency. Let's make her in control of her life. Let's make any lesson that she learns not come from a love interest. Why does a man and the love of a man and the acceptance of a romantic love interest be the thing, the kind of the soul questioner? Why does it have to be that? Let's find something else. And that's been really great. People are thinking about women, ethnicity, diversity very differently in the theatre. I feel like it's just the beginning. We're nowhere near where we need to be, but it is a huge concern.
Eddie, you said a couple of years ago, what keeps me going is this terror that I'll get to the end of my life and not have had the opportunity to work at the level that I want to work at.
Yeah.
Can you really say that still?
No. And that's, I get almost emotional thinking about that. That fear that you are not going to get the opportunity to do the thing.
You're tearing up.
I know, because I know what it felt like. It's an awful feeling. And I see it in other people when they're like, you know what it is you want to do, but you don't have the opportunity, and you have to travel away from the place where you live, away from your family and your friends and your community, even your creative community, and find an opportunity elsewhere. So you have to fight really, really hard for it. But it means that when it comes, it feels earned. Nobody in America has seen any of my acting. So when I'm on the street in New York with my co-writers and an Aussie comes up and goes, "It's Eddie Perfect, can we get a photo?" They're like, "What the are you famous?" You know, there's that stuff. And I just go, "No, Australians, we all know each other. It's a small place." And so I got that gig without having ever seen these collaborators. I was at the end of an email, at the end of a phone, and I would make my demos and I would email them off, and they liked the writing, and I got the gig because of the writing, and that feels good. And it's an extraordinarily terrifying thing to feel like you're wasting your talent.
So let's finish off that idea. That terror then, is it now in a cage?
It's such a strange thing, writing, because every project, you have no idea if you're going to be able to write it or write it well. I mean, you got a gut instinct and you just sort of leap into the fray. But I'm always terrified. I'm always terrified. I've been writing Beetlejuice for 2 years, and we've probably got 2 years to go. And, you know, it can close after a week if it doesn't work.
But come on, we can't finish on a down note.
How is that a downer? Oh, well, this is the thing. I think Australia is creatively is a little too afraid of failure. Failure is part of it. Failure is really important. Like, if you do something and you succeed, you learn nothing. You don't. You go, "Yay, I'm amazing." You fail, you got a lot of soul searching to do. What went wrong, and then you really learn. And I think that there's a strange thing in Australia where people are so terrified of failure that even from a critical perspective, or maybe even an audience perspective, there's a joy in seeing things go down. You know, great things fail all the time. You have a great idea, super well executed, but it might be the wrong climate for it. Or it might not find its audience, or it might be marketed badly. And I think we should be more comfortable with failure. I don't see it as it's a hard thing to deal with, but I don't see it as a negative thing.
It's a great answer. Eddie Perfect, it's been such a pleasure having you on 1+1.
It's been a pleasure doing it.
And that's one of my top 10. Thanks for watching. You can watch again on iView. See you next time.